There is one group that decided to challenge what Adam Schiff had done. The watchdog organization called Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit seeking access to Schiff's secretive subpoenas to determine whether he had abused the power of his office. Naturally, Schiff fought to keep them sealed despite his repeated commitments to transparency. Joining us now is Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Tom, thanks for being with us to talk about this. Explain why you decided to sue Adam Schiff and his committee under the Freedom of Information Act.
Well, we saw that Schiff had subpoenaed and then published the records he directly subpoenaed the records of Rudy Giuliani, and through that subpoena, he got phone records of Devin Nunes, a fellow member of Congress, other members of the Trump legal team. Of course, this is all during the first sham impeachment. He published that information, also included the records of a reporter. And what was very interesting about that process is it wasn't a court process. He just issued it out of his own committee, out of his own power of the House, which now it turns out they're telling us is an unbridled power. So our lawyers, being the smart lawyers they are, said, well, how is it we can figure out what went on here? This wasn't a Justice Department subpoena. Congress exempts itself from the Freedom of Information Act. So we asked, under the common law right of public access to government documents that we as citizens and human beings have, it's a right that predates the Constitution. It's this inherent right individuals have to access government documents. So we kicked it into the district court, the lower court. We were stymied there. They used the speech or debate clause to keep it secret. We went to the appellate court, and the appellate court upheld that analysis. But one of the judges said, this is a kind of a new issue. This may not be the perfect vehicle for getting there, although I think it is. But there is this common law right of public access to documents, and we need to think about how Congress is held accountable under this process.
And yet, it was a 3-judge panel, and it was dominated by liberals on the panel. And they bought into this whole argument that Schiff had made, citing the speech and debate clause of the Constitution. And he said, look, under that clause, I have unlimited surveillance power. I have unfettered authority to do what I want to do. I can invade the privacy rights of American citizens. I can do it without notice. I find it shocking that any judge would ever agree with it, although, frankly, when you look at the D.C. U.S. Court of Appeals, that's sort of the way they trend there, isn't it?
Circuit Court up there is terrifically liberal, and we weren't even challenging the subpoenas per se. We were highlighting the public interest in exposing them, but they weren't persuaded. And in the courts here in D.C., I'm not a lawyer, but I've been doing this for 23 years. You talk about the deep state; it's in the courts too. And I say that in the sense that the courts here in the District of Columbia are extremely deferential to government interests, whether it be in the executive branch or the congressional branch. Now, ideologically, for left-wing reasons, sometimes they veer from that. But it's a government town. It's a company town here in D.C., so it's not a surprise. But the segue here is, we just get this decision 2 weeks ago, more or less. And then there's these news stories that you need a decoder ring to analyze because they're so fundamentally dishonest, where Adam Schiff is the alleged target of lawful grand jury subpoenas issued under court process, and we're told it's the worst thing in the world, and Schiff is outraged by it as he's issuing secret subpoenas, not subject to any court scrutiny, that he thinks he has the right to do for not only the president's lawyer, for anyone Congress has it.
What's truly amazing is the media completely yawned when Adam Schiff was secretly collecting the phone records of these journalists and lawyers. They didn't care. Oh, it's okay. Now, all of a sudden, when they discover that Donald Trump's Department of Justice lawfully went to a grand jury and got subpoenas to try to track down crimes, the leak of classified information that arguably jeopardizes national security. But now the media is seething with anger that Trump's DOJ subpoenaed phone call records. There is such a conspicuous double standard, isn't there?
There is. And of course, it goes back to Trump doesn't deserve the protections of the Constitution. He doesn't have the civil rights or the powers of the presidency anyone else would have had in a similar position. And now we see that they're broadening the attack in terms of denying civil rights to all Trump supporters, practically speaking. But going back to the media, I mean, are you the smartest man in Washington, D.C. that quickly put two and two together that, well, Schiff subpoenaed people secretly? Why is he complaining that a grand jury subpoenaed him secretly? Of course you're not. The media know exactly what's happening. And of course, we have to remember, this story about Schiff comes on the heels of stories about media companies being similarly targeted in leak investigations. Now, I've looked at the laws about the handling classified information, the dissemination of it, and there's no exception for the media to allow them to break the laws about the handling classified information. So they don't think they should be subject to subpoena as well. So it's quite obvious, and it follows that their ally, Adam Schiff, should not be subject to subpoenas as well, because, look, they're in the bed together as they, it looks to me, engage in leaking, targeting their political opposition. And, leaking is not always, it may be something that normal people don't like doing. It's not always illegal. Right. But Schiff's role as head of the Intelligence Committee, Swalwell, of course, is caught up in this too. When you have classified information that gets out, you're talking, as you highlight, crimes that harm our nation's security. And the one thing I would, I talked about the Dakota ring analysis you need to bring when you look at these news stories. The real scandal is the Biden administration, 5 months into their administration, shut down criminal leak investigations, potentially implicating allies in Congress, have curtailed criminal leak investigations that had either Trump as a victim or maybe others, and are helping the media now avoid legal scrutiny that every other American would be subject to. So here you had the Biden Justice Department jumping through Joe Biden's hoops. He didn't like the media subpoenas, so they changed the policy on that. And they shut down an investigation to one of Biden's friends that helped him get into office. That, to me, is the news. And the other news is, what was Schiff being investigated for? They've been coy about what that is. They have all these details about the investigation, about the subpoena, but not what it was for. Isn't that curious? What are they hiding?
Whereas the Justice Department under Donald Trump, Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, the professionals at the Department of Justice, not political appointees, but professionals, they're trying to locate those who committed crimes, the leaking of classified information, because it does damage to our national security. They're classified for a reason. Schiff, on the other hand, there's no evidence he was doing anything of that sort, but rather snooping on political opponents, or as the Wall Street Journal called it, abusing surveillance powers for drive-by smears of Republicans and the press. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's really what Adam Schiff was doing when he decided to issue these secret subpoenas during the impeachment hearing of journalists and lawyers?
He clearly was on a fishing expedition, and it isn't like he found anything. You can see it was salacious in the sense he just published the records of a fellow member of Congress, the lawyers for the president, in the impeachment report. So the secret subpoena is one thing. Then he published the phone records. And when you look at his description of the phone calls that he put into his impeachment report, there was no there. There was a lot of there was not even smoke, let alone fire. It just shows you the abusive process was just to exercise power to let your political opponents know that they can be gotten anywhere. And every American should now be warned or on notice that the House has said to a federal court they can issue subpoenas secretly without court authorization for any information they want on anyone.
What's so confounding and bewildering is that, when Adam Schiff the other day threw his temper tantrum, how dare they, subpoena my phone call records? Nobody in the media said to him, and he was on television shows, he was standing in front of microphones and cameras, and nobody said to him, well, Mr. Schiff, didn't you do the exact same thing? Didn't you arguably trample on Fourth Amendment rights of American citizens? Aren't you a glaring hypocrite? You're condemning the Department of Justice for doing lawfully what you did arguably unlawfully because you had no probable cause. You just did it. The Department of Justice has to have probable cause and present it in front of a grand jury that then issues the subpoena in a very lawful way. But nobody did that. I scoured the New York Times, the Washington Post. I watched clips of these interviews with Schiff on television news media, and nobody brought it up. Now, a part of me thought, well, they've got amnesia. I mean, they're so stupid they just don't remember, even though it was like 2-3 years ago. But then I began to realize that they know it, but they just don't want to be fair and objective and neutral and ask a challenging question of a liberal Democrat who hates Donald Trump, because the media hates Donald Trump.
They do, and I know they knew it. I know at least one major newspaper knew it. It was raised with them. They chose not to report on it. Bloomberg Law reported on the decision. The decision is one of the most important courts in the country on a congressional subpoena power. Of course the media knew about it. This is about attacking the Trump administration. It's about covering for the Biden administration's protection of their criminal conduct or unwillingness to investigate it. So this is the spin. And the spin is number one. Facts and truth are secondary.
It's no wonder the Department of Justice was looking into Adam Schiff and his committee, given the fact that Schiff has a long and distinguished track record of leaks. And this is also a guy who is probably one of the most prolific liars who engaged in chronic deceits during the whole Trump-Russia collusion hoax. He insisted he had clear and obvious evidence of Trump-Russia conspiracy. He didn't. He claimed there was no abuse of FISA. There was. And then he moved to the impeachment. He denied that he and his committee had any prior contact with a so-called whistleblower, who's not a whistleblower at all under the law. That was simply untrue. So, when it comes to Adam Schiff, it's naturally to be suspicious of not just his motives, but his actions. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. If there's anyone who should have, let me put it this way. Adam Schiff should be the target of criminal leak investigations simply based on the handling of the classified Ukraine phone call. It's pretty clear, to me at least, and based on the evidence I've been looking at, and this is all publicly available, that they got access to that classified phone call outside the proper channels in a way that violated the rules about the handling of that sensitive national security matter. That should be the subject of a criminal investigation. I don't know what generated this DOJ investigation. My guess it was they backed themselves into asking for Schiff's files because I don't trust the DOJ to do anything competently or focused specifically on Schiff. But the fact remains the Biden administration shut it down We're not being told what it's about. As you point out, Schiff has a demonstrated record of leaking information. And because of his role in the Intelligence Committee, he ought to be a suspect in, frankly, a series of criminal leak investigations that, had politically the target of Trump. But in terms of the harm, it's broader. It harms the country because when you look at the law on classified information, the reason it's protected is because its release would harm our nation's security and in many cases put lives at risk.
So Schiff's argument currently stands as accepted by the Court of Appeals for the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. And that argument is that I can do anything I want to do, that I have an unlimited power to gain access to American citizens' phone records, and that power is unfettered, and you don't have jurisdiction over me, federal courts. That is a frightening concept. And if left unchallenged, that'll be the new standard. So my question to you is, will you challenge it by taking the matter now to a higher court, which would be the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, Greg, our lawyers will have to evaluate the decision. We're still doing that. We have a little bit of time. And as you know, the lawyers look at what the options are. And the two options here are going up to the Supreme Court immediately, or asking the full circuit, the full D.C. circuit, to hear it and consider it en banc. I think the law is pretty, we make a compelling case. And I think the circuit, the appellate panel, their view was, look, the circuit law is this. We can't overrule it as a panel. And Judge Henderson seemed to me, in her concurring opinion, suggested that maybe the full circuit, the implication of what she said was maybe the full circuit sitting en banc can take another look at this. So we'll see what the lawyers figure out. We have to see where our chances are best going to be and where the law will take us in that regard. And, from my perspective, and I don't know for sure whether we'll appeal at this because, you have to defer to the lawyers in large measure. It's not a matter of what we do. It's how we do it in terms of appealing.
Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Thanks for being with us today as our guest.
Hey, thank you, Greg. And thank you for covering this important issue. This is a major rule of law issue in terms of the threat Congress poses to our civil liberties.
It is indeed. Tom Fitton, again, thanks very much. And that's The Brief. I'm Gregg Jarrett. Thanks for listening.